My name is Jane Nice, and on behalf of the Camden Conference, we'd like to welcome you to this morning's program. We'd like to thank the Camden Public Library for making these programs possible for us every year. I especially thank Julia Sayasar. I know, Julia, you're on Zoom at home now, recovering from COVID. And she has been working diligently to pull this together with a great team from the Nature Conservancy. But also thank you for her cohort, Russell O'Brien, for manning the attack and stepping in Julia's absence. The Camden Conference is a nonprofit, nonpartisan citizens forum driven almost exclusively by volunteers from our community. Our mission is to foster informed discourse on world issues. And for that, we offer a series of community events leading up to our annual weekend. This year, the events are going to give us, of course, background on the yearly topic and touch on areas related to the Camden Conference that may not be covered in our three-day format in February. This year's conference, our 37th, is India, Rising Ambitions, Challenges at Home. It will take place only 5 weeks from now, February 16th to the 18th, at the Camden Opera House, live streamed to two other venues, one in Portland and one in Rockland, and virtual access for registered households. Ticket sales are available on our website, camdenconference.org, and there you can find out how to get the tickets, become a member or volunteer, and learn about our speakers for the conference in February. Today, it's my honor to introduce members of an esteemed environmental nonprofit, the Nature Conservancy. Kate Dempsey is here as the state director for the Nature Conservancy in Maine and has headed significant investments here in Maine to restore and conserve the potential among our many natural resources. And our thanks today also to a wonderful team, it seems, in India, Girija, does it? I think, welcome Girija. She is here in Zoom, having got a presentation ready for us. And they are here to explain virtually a first example in India of their approach to these challenges. Collaboration, bringing policy, science, and community together to improve the quality and amount of water available in freshwater ecosystems. We are very, very grateful that the Nature Conservancy has worked with us. I think a very big team of folks that have worked with you, Kate, including Alice, Genevieve, Jeremy, Tamara. Have I got everybody? A wonderful group who has been listening to our every one of thousands of questions. So thank you very much. Please give Kate a warm welcome to the Camden Library.
Thank you. Don't forget your coffee.
I will not ever. That's my go-to.
Thank you so much. And thank you to those of you who were able to brave the piles of snow this morning here in Camden, Maine. As you heard Jane say, I'm Kate Dempsey. I'm the state director with the Nature Conservancy here in Maine. I've been with the Conservancy for 20 years and been the state director for 8 years now. My former life was in the policy arena, so don't get me going on that subject because then I'll take us down another rabbit hole. I am incredibly pleased to be here today with all of you, and I will be introducing Girija in a few minutes, and during the question and answer, I'll invite, and you'll see why, Tamara Lead-Bernard, who's on our main team, in case there's questions about the connection of the work in India to our work here in Maine. So let me give you, what I'm going to do is give you a little brief overview of the Nature Conservancy, because sometimes people know TNC and you know us from about 30 years ago, or you know one tiny bit of our work here locally, or you've interacted with us somewhere else on the planet. So Let me give you a quick overview, and then I will turn it over to Girija, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, including the people on Zoom land chatting your questions. Let's always the. All right. It is not, Russell, it is not moving forward now. Hold, please.
You're doing the.
There we go. Okay, more aggressively. Very simply put, our mission of the Nature Conservancy is to conserve the lands and waters which all life depends. And we do this both for people's sake and for nature's sake in and of itself. The Nature Conservancy, as you'll hear in a minute, is a global organization, and as a group, worldwide, we have one set of goals to work towards in a very urgent manner. We are dealing with what I would like to think of, unfortunately, as the existential threat of and reality of climate change happening now, the need for climate adaptation, and then the loss of biodiversity at the same time. So all of our work intersects biodiversity loss and climate, and our strategies try to address both, as much as we can. And today you'll hear about one type of strategy. We have so many others, and over the years, maybe we'll share some more through the Camden conference. I'm just going to put this slide up for a second. We kiddingly call it the John Deere wheel. The point that we're really trying to make with this slide is, as I mentioned, we have one core set of goals. Wherever you're working, wherever in the world, you're moving towards those goals collectively. And we do it through various strategies. Protection, which you may know a little bit more about, thinking about what regenerative food, thriving fisheries looks like, and then, as I mentioned, climate change. And we use tools like ecological science, social science. We work with local leaders. We use, as I mentioned, policy and financing tools, and we are grounded in the UN Human Rights Agreement. So the Conservancy works in almost 180 places in the world. And as I said, we'll hear just about one of those places. We have been here in the US for over 70 years. We are represented in every state in the US, and we have an entity in Canada. This is, I would say, a little bit of a deception because most of our work in Canada is in the Northwest region and very closely connected to the First Nations of Canada. Our work in Latin America has been one of our longest regions of the world that we've worked in, and I would say Asia and Asia Pacific and Africa are growing very quickly in terms of our presence. You'll see the dark green is where the Nature Conservancy has professional staff grounded, and the lighter green are places where we work directly with partners to support their work. That said, as you'll hear, all of our work is with partnerships. So today we're going to talk about what we call water funds. And I'll give you a little diagram in a second to explain what those are. But if you think about this, this is a strategy we've developed out of Quito, Ecuador. There are 43 water funds that the Conservancy is involved with worldwide. 35 more are under development. There are 600 partners, 4 continents, 13 countries. Water funds are really a tool employed as a primary strategy for conservation of lakes, rivers, watersheds, and forests. What we often do is work with very typically a beer company initially, or Coca-Cola bottling, industries that require clean water. And we want to make sure communities, like a community like in the city of Quito, have access to clean water, and we do so by finding financing tools to conserve more of the forest and more of the watershed. And we do have, as I mentioned, one example here in Maine, and it is, in my opinion, a really wonderful example of how the Nature Conservancy works and how we think of ourselves as one organization. Our team, as you'll hear about in southern Maine, in the Sebago and Portland area, we've learned a ton from our colleagues outside of the US and really imported this concept to Maine. Similarly, we've done some exporting, things like the Penobscot River Restoration Project that my board vice chair here was intimately involved in. And that has really shaped how we think about energy siting around the world. But here in Maine, the Sebago Clean Waters program is primarily a forest conservation strategy. The Sebago watershed is 234,000 acres, and it acts as a natural filter for the drinking water of Greater Portland. Portland is unusual in a very exciting way in that it is one of 50 water districts in the US that does not have, that the EPA has granted a waiver for surface water treatment. That means that our forests, our natural systems are doing such a great job right now that it is less expensive and, in our opinion, better for the climate and biodiversity to conserve the forest than it is to build massive, what we would call gray infrastructure. So Tamara is our lead on that project, and we work very closely with the Portland Water District. They, in fact, use some of their ratepayer funds very publicly to conserve some of the forests, and the team has done a phenomenal job. So that's just one example of how we're connecting our work here in Maine to our work around the world. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome and introduce Dr. Girija Godbole. You've seen her wonderful bio here, and I think for those of you who've known TNC and know our deep grounding in ecological science, as I mentioned, we are also deeply committed to using social science, behavioral science, to think about how communities can create change for themselves. And so Girija brings this type of expertise to her work with their team in India. And she is going to come on screen, and I'm going to go on mute, Girija, and I'm going to stop sharing and welcome you and hand it to you.
Right. Okay.
Welcome, Girija. Thank you so much for coming. And it's very late at night, so we're extra appreciative. I kept looking at my clock yesterday and thinking of you already working and then continuing into the evening. So thank you, and it's wonderful to be able to show how well TNC works across the globe together.
Right. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for the introduction and setting the stage so well. My job becomes easier with that. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope the snowstorm wasn't too bad, and thanks so much for coming and listening to us. My team and me, one of my teammates, Dr. Sitaram, is here. We are all very grateful to the organizers for giving us this opportunity. And we are also grateful to the Maine chapter, because they're the ones who kind of helped us in the initial stages of the particular project that I'm going to talk more about later. So I think I'll just start with the presentation. Kate has already spoken about TNC. So as you know, it is one of the largest organizations in the world, founded many years back, with lots of committed scientists and social scientists as well. In India, TNC has been working since 2017. Why TNC is working in India? What are the objectives it has? So mainly it partners with the government of India with its vision to develop without destruction. We also partner with the India's growth trajectory. So we believe in collective efforts for inclusive growth. And of course, we want to be the enabler for the international climate commitments that India has. And also empowering India's commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So in India, to fulfill these objectives, we work in different parts of India. For example, in the northern India, in the states of Punjab and Haryana, we work with the communities on regenerative agriculture. Then in the more central India, we work for restoration of one of the large rivers, River Narmada. Then we do the renewable energy work all over India. We also have some green printing for restoring the urban wetlands in Chennai, in southern India. And also we have some other carbon markets kind of work going on all over India. The particular project that I'm going to talk about is for improving the water security. So it's in the western part of India, in the state of Maharashtra. And our project is called Ghod River Water Fund. Kate has already explained the concept of water fund. Just to give you some sort of context and the urgency of the situation, the demand in India is expected to double by 2030, the demand for water. However, 54% of India faces high to extremely high water stress. So the situation is really alarming. And by 2025, it's predicted that 14 out of the 20 key river basins will be water stressed. And 21 major cities will be facing severe groundwater crisis specifically. This is all based on the Niti Aayog report. It's a Government of India institution. So as you can imagine, the situation is really dire. And one of the solutions that we think could be water fund. For water fund, we've chosen one particular river basin in Western India, in the state of Maharashtra. And this is going to be the first water fund of its kind in India. So we all are very excited about it. When this river basin was selected for this water fund, some of the key factors that were considered were, of course, the urgency of the need, the characteristics of the watershed, then the conservation value of that this basin offers, because it's in one of the biodiverse rich basins. Then the stakeholder, how are they going to support? So we did some studies and we thought that in this particular basin, the conditions are more enabling. Also the potential partners and return on investment and the population that will be impacted through our work. So this particular work is supported by the Cummins Foundation. This particular river basin, the Ghod River Basin, is part of a Krishna River Basin. Krishna River is one of the largest peninsular rivers in India. And this river basin, Ghod River Basin, it falls in the source basins for Krishna. So it's really one of the crucial river basins. So that's another criteria when it was selected. The Ghod River is around 177 kilometers long, and the basin covers more than 4,500 square kilometers. So quite a large basin. Some of the important factors about this river basin. The source basin originates in the Bhimashankar Wildlife Sanctuary, which is part of the Western Ghats. Western Ghats has been listed as one of the biodiversity hotspots, globally important by the IUCN. It's the main source of water for more than 4.5 million people, so quite a large number of people. In the upstream of this river basin, you have vulnerable tribal communities who rely on the ecosystem health for their livelihood. In the downstream of this river basin, you have more than 200 industries which rely on the water from this river basin. So the river basin is really important one. Just to give you some sense of the river basin. So in the upstream of the river basin, where the river originates, you have the Western Ghats Mountains. Also, the tribal communities mostly live in the upstream of the area. And when the various dams were built, some of these people were displaced. So this is how the upstream looks. We have 5 major dams in this river basin. As you come in more in the midstream of this river basin, you have more of sugarcane plantations, and you also have some canal irrigation. As you come in the lower stream, you have industries. So most of these 200 industries that I mentioned about, they are located in the lower part of the basin. Okay. So what are the expected outcomes of this Ghod River Water Fund? As I said, if we manage to implement it successfully, it will be the first of its kind water fund in India. We hope that we can also somehow enable equitable access to water for all of the communities who are residing in this river basin. We are fully aware that it's quite an ambitious task, but we are trying to kind of achieve this. It will improve the quality of water. It will help in conservation of forest and wildlife habitats. As part of this water fund, we also want to kind of create a coalition of citizen scientists. So local communities, the local organizations, maybe government functionaries, we want to bring them together and form this citizen science coalition. As part of this water fund, we also want to implement some of the pilot projects. And these projects will focus on showcasing the efficacy of the nature-based solutions. And so to begin with, we are going to start with the upstream area of this river basin, where the river originates and which falls in the Western Ghats Mountains, which is, as I said, ecologically sensitive area. So these first pilots will be located in that part. Typically, water fund is part of the watershed investment program, and it has various stages like pre-feasibility, feasibility, design, execution. And our water fund currently is in the feasibility stage. And we are, like our team in the US, the science team, they are doing the feasibility analysis for our water fund. And this feasibility analysis typically tells us what are the water security, biodiversity, and human development challenges on which we can work and improve. Then which nature-based solutions can help us to improve these identified challenges. Then where exactly in the basin should we implement these interventions for them to be most effective? And then, of course, what are the costs of these interventions and what are the benefits of the proposed interventions? As Kate mentioned in the beginning, TNC very much gives emphasis to the science-based kind of solutions. And so we are doing a scientific analysis of all this. So far, we have done some work. So to start with, we first did the detailed stakeholder mapping to understand who's doing what in the river basin. We also tried to understand the enabling conditions in the river basin, the challenges that we might face. Then we also did a detailed review of the existing policies, rules, regulations, and guidelines related to water. Once we did all this, we thought that it would be good to have some sort of advisory committee, which will help us to take this work forward. So we have an advisory committee for this particular water fund, which is of 8 people, 8 individuals who come from various backgrounds. So some of them are good with the government policies. They've worked in the government sector. Some of them are into social sciences. Some of them are into monitoring and evaluation. Some of them are good with the fundraising part. So we have people from different backgrounds. As I mentioned, we are going to do the pilots in the river basin. So for the first pilot, we have chosen one small village in the upstream of the river basin. It's called Godbole. So some of the key characters of this river basin is, as I said, it's in the upstream area of the river basin, in this ecologically important part. Majority of the village are tribals. There are 2-3 different types of tribes. It's a small village, so it's only 400, compared to Indian standards. So it's for almost 446 households in that village, and the population is hardly 2,000. This particular village receives heavy rainfall, but it also suffers from water scarcity. So for last 5 years, they have been heavily dependent on the water tankers, especially in the months of summer. Then it also faces from the challenge of soil erosion and heavy deforestation. One of the exciting factor for us is that the elected head of this particular village is a young tribal woman, the one wearing the yellow outfit, the yellow sari. And she's very enthusiastic and she's really keen to do something for her village. And because TNC believes in gender or caste, religion, those kind of issues, we are very excited that we have in our first pilot village, we have this elected woman Sarpanch. A Sarpanch is the term for the elected head of a village. The villagers are also very keen to work with us. So that's an added advantage for us. The villages have adopted some of the sustainable development goals, which are compatible to the work that TNC does. So that's also one of the plus points for us in selecting this village. And for this work in this village, we are doing it through a partner organization, because as Kate mentioned, we believe in working with the local partners. So we are doing this work with a local partner organization. This organization has been doing a lot of work with the tribals in this particular river basin for almost 40 years. So we are doing it with them. So we have already prepared a plan of which nature-based solutions we want to implement in this particular village. And then we have started with the implementation of it. We've also done some stakeholder consultations because to start with, we wanted to involve the stakeholders right from the beginning, because as you know, the sense of ownership and sense of belonging will really make the work much more effective than if we just have them as add-on. So when we started the work, we had a stakeholder consultation to understand and identify the water security challenges from their point of view. Ghod River Water Fund has also been covered in the vernacular media. So as I said, we are just starting with the first pilot, and as we go along, we'll have more to say about our work. But nonetheless, just to explain what Water Fund is, there was an article carried in one of the vernacular newspapers in the city of Pune, where the Water Fund is located in the state of Maharashtra. It was covered by the newspaper. We also do some employee engagement activities for the Cummins employees. So the picture that you see them sitting on the ground, they had just finished planting some banana saplings in one village. And they were like doing some interaction with the villagers after that. And we hope to do many more of these employee engagement activities for the Cummins employees. We have also been doing outreach activities as part of the Ghod River Water Fund. So we've been taking part in various panel discussions like today. We also presented our work in some of the G20, U20 kind of panels. And so wherever we get a chance, we try and participate, because it also helps us to get feedback on our work, on our ideas. And that's something that we really find useful. So some of the next steps that we have is, as I said, we are going to implement these pilots through the partner organizations. We are identifying new pilots. We are finalizing the feasibility analysis. The stakeholder engagement and consultation will be held hopefully in the month of March to endorse these findings. And then we'll start with the actual design of the water fund, which is quite an exciting and challenging kind of a phase for us. We'll also start with the citizen scientist coalition building. As I said, employee engagement work will go on. We also hope to work with the local schools. So we've already started some activity in one of the first pilot village, but we want to take it forward. And especially in the water quality monitoring, we plan to engage the young people in the villages, the school kids. We also need to start exploring funding sources because the water fund is expected to be be there for a longer time. So we need to find other sources of funding. And also we will start identifying new potential sites for the new water funds. So as we kind of go along a little bit, we will start doing the feasibility analysis for the new sites. So perhaps I can stop here and then we can have questions and answers, if that's okay. Kate, what do you suggest?
Wonderful, Girija. Thank you so much. Yay.
Thanks.
You're still sharing?
Yeah. Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, stop sharing, why don't you? And if you're on Zoom land, feel free to put questions into the Q&A, and I will monitor those. And if there's a question either that Girija doesn't feel comfortable answering, she'll invite one of her colleagues in. And similarly for the Maine work, I'll give Tamara, I'll give you a heads up, Tamara, so you can jump in as well.
Thanks. As I said, my colleague, Dr. Sitaram Sharnangat, is also here, and he has lots of experience of doing this kind of work in Maharashtra especially. So I'm quite happy that he joined us.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Welcome all. Let's see if there's any questions here in the room. And Girija, as I promised you the other day, I will repeat the questions even though the sound quality is good, but just to make it a little easier for you to, because you can't see the person speaking.
So a first question, I noticed on the early slide that is it the Cummings Foundation? As I said, is due to expire 2025 so far. How much might they see as a foundation would be expected to be completed, shall we say, in terms of their goals? I'm not sure they'll continue. I hope. Good luck.
Yeah, did you hear that, Girija? Let me
Yes,
repeat it for the audience. Yeah, the Cummings Foundation is currently funding the Nature Conservancy. And it has a deadline of the 2025, which scarily is just a year from now. How much progress, or are they funding the feasibility and this pre-work? What are they expecting of the Nature Conservancy?
All right. Okay. Thanks for that question. I must say that Cummins has been really supportive and really, really very kind of understanding, because as you know, because of the COVID, there was a considerable delay in all the activities. But in spite of that, they have been very patient and they have very kindly kind of extended the work by 1 year already, considering the delay. We have started with the pilot project. So they are very keen that we do some work on the ground. So we've been we have regular interactions with their team in India and also in the US. And so we have come up with this plan of the pilot sites. And as I said, the first pilot implementation has already started. Now our challenge is to identify the other sources of funding. I mean, that's Cummins very much expects us to do that, to take this forward, because they've been really kind to support the initial part of this water fund. And water fund is not a really short-term kind of an activity. This is just the beginning of the water fund. So many water funds, they go on for many years, actually, like 7-8 years is the minimum, I suppose, just for the water fund to kind of get properly established. So yeah, initially we were slightly behind the schedule, but we are picking up. Does that answer your question? Or?
Well, it does help. Thank you very much. I understand the world of nonprofit.
Thank you.
If I can just follow up on that. Sorry, I know Julia is in there too, but there's a question. But I was wondering, of the over 100 industries that live and die, so to speak, by this watershed. If you could tell us if you have different kinds of industries that are actually helping to support this pilot. Yeah, and with that, the other side of that is, are there policies that, that are important in terms of how these different kinds of industries are allowed to operate within the watershed? For instance, in the US, I know when we have problems with our larger rivers, a lot of it is allowed to go to agriculture. How much agriculture versus other kinds of industries that may want to stake a claim, of course, for their use of this watershed. So I'm just trying to understand the big picture as well as understanding you're getting local support, you know, financial, if nothing else, from some of the industries that are going to benefit from the work you're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Right,
Right, thanks.
do you want me to consolidate, Girija?
Yeah.
If you,
Sure.
yeah.
First question is, you recognize that there are a number of industries in the region. First part of the question is, what role are they playing either in getting on board or helping to fund? So that's question one. Question two is, are there environmental controls on industry use of water that are not connected specifically to the water fund or connected eventually, you hope?
Yeah. Thank you. So some of the industries are doing some work in the river basin, so not with us right now. But for example, there is this ITC, Indian Tobacco Company. They've been doing a lot of work with the farmers, especially in the midstream and the low stream. So midstream, you have like sugarcane farmers. And as you know, sugarcane is water intensive crop. So they are like working with the farmers to encourage them to use more efficient irrigation techniques, for example, drip irrigation or sprinkler, which will use less water. Many of these industries, they have to contribute certain amount, like 2% of their profits for corporate social responsibility. So, but unfortunately, not many of them will want to spend the money on, say, nature-based solutions, because one reason is there's not much awareness about it, but also because typically education or health is their priority. But we are kind of through Cummins, we are going to approach some of these organizations to convince them of the efficacy of the nature-based solutions for the water conservation. And that's why doing these pilots is so crucial for us. Like once we are doing something on ground, we can go to them more confidently, showing that these are the sites where we are working. Also because TNC, compared to some other organizations, is a new entrant to the field in India, especially in India. So not many people know us right now. And also there are some other organizations who have been working in the river basin for many years. So I think that's one of the reasons. But through Cummins, we are quite confident that we can approach some other corporates. In terms of policy regulations, yes, there are certain regulations on the industries for use of water. They also have to pay for the water. So there are certain slabs. Perhaps my colleague Sitaram can come in and tell us more if he knows. Sitaram, do you want to chip in or?
Basically, Water Resource Department and Maharashtra Pollution Control Board. These two entities are there who are regulating. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So these are entities who are totally involved in controlling the water distribution and other related activities. And irrigation department is also there, who is taking care of water which is related to irrigation and allocation of water for domestic purpose, irrigation purpose, and industrial purpose. This kind of work is also distributed amongst these three entities. Major role is being played by Water Resource Department of Maharashtra, who is allocating the water, and among the water which is allocated for different purposes, then Maharashtra Pollution Control Board, it is playing role with industries. Irrigation department, it is playing role with farmers, which are especially involved in irrigated farms. And according to norms, drinking water is being provided. So this is the system right now.
And just to quickly add to that, this allocation of water is a very contentious issue, especially as you know, this part of India depends on the monsoons. So if we have less rainfall in any year, then it becomes really tricky for the water allocation. Like there is a lot of conflict sometimes in terms of how water is allocated. And of course, those who have more say in this, yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Especially we are talking about Ghod River Basin, where there are 5 rivers and 7 dams. The Ghod Dam is located very downstream of the basin, which is earlier constructed dam, and recently Kukdi complex of irrigation that has recently constructed. But in many cases, on the backdrop of climate change, only upstream dams get filled and downstream dams very often remains empty. And in such situation, the distribution of water equitably, that becomes very terrific job for each and every entity, department which is involved in this. Recently, this year, we are also facing this because at one time we are saying that Ghod River Basin, it is receiving high amount of rainfall, but by considering its larger area, it is the basin which receives high rainfall in upstream. In middle zone, it is rain shadow area because of western ranges, it becomes rain shadow area. And in the lowermost part of basin, it becomes drought prone area. So again, different interest, different use of water, it makes distribution very complicated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So there
Thank
are a
you.
couple of questions.
Yeah.
In the,
There's some questions here in the Q&A. See if I guess I'm putting them up. Let me skip actually to Frank's question first about your use for, the model you use for successful community involvement, because that gives you a chance to dig in a little bit, Girija. And Tamara, there might be some similarities here in Maine if you feel like adding to it, but do you want to talk through the phases and with the particular focus on community and technical expertise? The other question that had been there before is how did TNC choose the Ghod River Basin first? So maybe weave a little bit of that in if you can.
Okay. So regarding the community involvement, as I said, we first have done quite an extensive exercise of identifying the stakeholders in the entire basin, and which stakeholders interested in what issue and what they can bring in terms of taking this further, like Ghod River Water Fund further. So we had that extensive exercise through which we identified certain stakeholders. At the community level, we had one very detailed exercise of planning for the first pilot site that we have selected. We did like 3 years of participatory rural appraisal exercise led by Sitaram here to understand the local communities' views about the problems, the solutions, the resources that they have, what are the constraints they feel, their aspirations, so many of these things. We also did walks around the village to understand it with them. And then after that, we came up with a plan of which nature-based solutions we should be doing where and all that. So it was a very participatory kind of exercise. So that's how we started. In terms of the citizen scientist, we will collaborate with the organizations who have been working in this field. And then we'll bring in the local communities, the local youth, and maybe local schools, colleges to be part of this coalition. And also we very much believe that the knowledge that local people have, the traditional knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, it is crucial and how best we can kind of combine the scientific knowledge and the traditional knowledge. So we kind of value it very much, and so we are looking for ways how we can incorporate the knowledge of the people. And especially, I mean, we know that people are not monoliths, communities are not monoliths. So when we say people, we also want to kind of distinguish, and we also want to bring in knowledge of, say, women, the rural women, the tribal women, then people who are supposedly from the lower castes, or people who are tribal people, who are non-literate people, but they have like vast knowledge about the environment. So how best can we bring that in? So we are working with some of the individuals, some of the organizations who have this kind of background and understanding, who will help us to kind of get this right and maybe do it better.
Girija, can you elaborate a little bit more, because on the gender work that TNC is invested in, particularly I would say in Asia Pacific, which, again, have really been leaders in helping the conservation world really incorporate gender, specifically women's voices. Why? I mean, you kind of got to why it's very important, but what results are we seeing outside of this on the durability or how it changes conservation generally? So why gender?
Why gender? Yeah. And when we are talking about gender, I also want to acknowledge that we are very much aware that it's not just like we don't want to fall into this men, women, only that. So, but for our local context, it's usually like these two genders that are more talked about. And women, because I think perhaps Sitaram can say more, because he's like our person for the community engagement. But yeah, women have a very specific, especially the tribal and the local women who use the resources. They have a very different relationship with the resources, and they also use the resources in a very different way. So many times we see that they are more like committed for the long-term conservation and preservation of the resources rather than just go for the short-term gains. We see that very, 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 very starkly in some of the cases, that men typically will go for like cash crops, for example, whereas women would want to do something which is more sustainable, which will like protect the environment and give them results for longer period of time. So yeah, so I'm going to let Sitaram come in.
Sitaram, what would you like to add? And then Tamara, I'm going to bring you in so you can come on screen if you'd like.
Or perhaps Tamara can come in.
Yeah. So should I, or Tamara?
If you want to quickly say a couple of things.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, we can see women, they're mostly involved in all the activities related to water conservation, agriculture, so many things. They are involved in decision making also, but it is not visual. If husband and wife, they are sitting on the field and they are talking about conserving the water at the one corner. So women is taking part on large extent in taking decisions. But when it is coming to the community level, always in our scenario, male are looking that they are playing a very crucial role, and they are doing each and everything related to taking decisions, implementation, whatever it is related to, maybe it is NBS, maybe it is agriculture and so on. So for avoiding this, what we have done, while Girija was previously answering for last question, we have made an arrangement in our program where one village level committee is formed, and especially we have invited 50% women in the committee, so that along with household decision making procedure, they can become part of community decision making process also. So that is very important point we have considered. So, and again, there is a convergence of community, technical experts, and different stakeholders. Like whatever technical experts are suggesting that options are kept in the meeting of community, and community is allowed to take decision, or whether they are deviating, then technical persons are there to explain them whether it is good to deviate or not to deviate. So in that way, the kind of convergence we are trying to achieve in the decision making and implementation of different interventions which are intended under this program. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Let me
Yeah.
invite Tamara, who is the Nature Conservancy in Maine's Community Programs Director, and she is our steering committee member on and partial designer of the Sebago Clean Waters Partnership. Tamara, there's a lot of themes that I'm not going to try to relist, but I would love you to give people a sense of what industries we've been working with, and then this recent conversation about equity and what resonates for you or translates back to here.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you, Sitaram and Girija. So nice to see you both again. When it comes to Sebago Clean Waters, I think the most important thing that we see in both of these projects, whether you're in India or in Maine, is just the greater impact that we can have when we collaborate with others. And that happens at many different levels, as you've heard. So with Sebago Clean Waters, we do have 12 business partners right now. We have many who are breweries, and we also have folks that focus on water. We partner with IDEX Industries as well that uses a lot of water. When we first started, our thought process was to really focus on industries that really relied on water and used the most water, and thought those were going to be the folks who would be the most interested. And the reality is that the nexus with industry has really been around what are the values of that industry and what are they trying to put forward. So when it comes to our breweries, of course, they care about clean water, but they also really care about, healthy living and recreation and getting their employees out in the watershed to enjoy it. And the same is true with a lot of our other industries around Portland. So that's been a huge focus in our partnerships with industry so far. The other focus, of course, is climate. So it all depends. You sort of have to meet people where they're at and where their interests are at. And what is so lovely about Sebago Clean Waters, and also what I'm seeing in the Ghod River Water Fund, is that it hits on many different levels. So we're working in so many different ways. When it comes to equity, the key, and Sitaram, spoke beautifully about this, having 50% women on their group making decisions. And that is really what Sebago Clean Waters is striving for, is really recognizing the fact that our watershed extends up till Bethel, and the work that's happening on the ground is kind of above Sebago Lake, for those who are familiar with the geography around Sebago Lake. But the folks who benefit from the water are in the greater Portland area. And so the diversity of people who live throughout the greater Portland area is much greater than what you find when you're looking in the watershed up through Bethel. And so our work as a coalition right now is really around engaging those voices who are less heard, who definitely benefit from this clean water, but really finding out, how best, what are their needs, and really identifying that, and really working more closely with them. So that's kind of where we're right now. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you. And what's wonderful is you all have actually met in person, which I just am like a bit envious of. There's a question in the Q&A, and I'm watching the time. So there's one specific to water policy in India, and I'm wondering if we could send would that be better to send out or if there's a quick answer? What do you think? I'm looking at you, Jane.
Well, I would say.
She did type it. Girija
Okay. Oh, great. Girija got it. So
We're okay.
Good.
So I was going to say a quick answer, but keep going.
Great. Let me ask another question. Just make sure I'm great. Okay. Obviously, when I started off our conversation, one, I said something wrong, which is I believe I said 180 countries, which would be really like world dominance, but I meant 80 countries. So, you know, I'm known for my hyperbole, and that was really to the extreme. But I think both from a US perspective and from an India perspective, attention, I feel, is what we've really been talking about. There's enormous urgency. That slide that you put up of the water scarcity in India, Girija, just I like tingle in a negative way because it's so overwhelming, right? So the urgency is this moment. In Maine, we're feeling the same, you know, too much water. We see the results of that. And here we all are talking about very intensive community-based work, and community in every sense, of industry to tribal members in Girija's case. How do you wrestle with that tension? How do you acknowledge the urgency and the demand to create relationships? So anyone can answer. Girija, why don't you start?
Okay, so thanks for this question, like this kind of the dilemma that we've been facing, because in our particular river basin, as I talked about it, like we have very diverse set of stakeholders. And so the challenge is how we bring them together. Because, and also in terms of the political cloud, the economic power, they are again very diverse. So if we want to bring them together, you know how it will play out. So what now we have been thinking, along with the results of the feasibility analysis, that a more realistic and practical approach for us is to kind of focus on one particular area of the river basin, say the upstream area, where the compatibility might be a little bit more in terms of the stakeholder interest, the characters of the stakeholder, and first do the like massive chunk of work there, and then kind of come down to the part of the rest of the river basin perhaps, because otherwise, given our resources will be all over the place, very scattered, and we won't be able to show any kind of meaningful impact. And so we are treating this as a pilot water fund in a way. So whatever learnings are from this water fund, we will be able to kind of convince hopefully the government and other organizations, other funders maybe, to help us to take this to other parts of the river basin and also perhaps the new river basins, because as I mentioned, the need is really, really quite it's a large and a dire need that we need to tackle. So yeah.
And building on that, I would just say, so Sebago Clean Water started in 2017, so we're a little bit ahead of where the Ghod River Water Fund is at. We are an established water fund, and definitely our early successes, we started also small, you know, our early successes built the momentum to help us be more successful down the road. And so we have only increased the number of businesses who have been interested and who are providing support. We've also galvanized federal funding support in the US here. And but all of these lessons learned are definitely ones that will apply when India moves forward with their program. And these are transferable lessons that we all can utilize in terms of how to both be present and relational in the moment while also looking to address the urgent impacts. And just keep plugging piecemeal.
I'm
not seeing this.
So I just want to make sure that we're okay.
No, this is up to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. We got some time.
Let me ask a more of a. Let me just check here, see if anyone has a burning question they want to get in. Tony, you're conjuring. I can see you. I know you well enough.
I understand the solution in sort of the vision, if you will, in Sebago, which is more forest protection to ensure clean water. I don't understand the vision in the Ghod. What's the big picture that we're ultimately aiming at?
So big picture, Girija, I know you work with lots of people on our team, but how does this fit into, you mentioned this as a pilot, where do you hope to be by even 2030?
You mean in terms of Ghod Water Fund, or?
How does it connect to the big?
And mine is, so what does the Ghod River Basin look like in a successful water fund? What's the ultimate solution?
What does it look like in, let's just say 10 years to give you a little bit more time, and then 20?
Yeah.
As I said, because of the nature of the river basin, what we are thinking is we will have maybe federation of water funds, smaller water funds. So water fund, for example, in the upstream part of the river basin. Then we have perhaps another water fund, a sub-water fund. We don't know what to call it yet, but say water funds in different parts of the river basin, and then have an overall mechanism for the water fund, because it's very difficult right now that the people in the downstream find it very difficult to kind of connect to the upstream because of various differences. So we are still struggling with that part, that like developing a clear vision of the water fund. And since we are in the early stages, it's perhaps we should not say anything with too much of confidence because it's still evolving very much. So I think that's one of the challenges that we're facing right now, actually. But we definitely want to focus on the upstream area first, because that's the most sensitive area in terms of ecology as well. And in terms of getting any meaningful kind of substantial water benefits, I think that's the region we have to focus. And the feasibility analysis also shows that this is the area which is very degraded. And if we do any work there, it's definitely going to help.
Sitaram
wants to make
if we go according to definition of water fund, it clearly speaks about connecting the low-lying people and people laying in the upstream catchment. And again, some industrial units are expected at downstream so that they can contribute in developing the upstream area. But what about other river basins where they are backward, no enough amount of water is available, and because of lack of water, no industry is developed? So who will take care of such basins? That is also one important issue. Here, in case of Ghod River Basin, fortunately, we are having certain industrial units. But still, while making Ghod River Water Fund successful, in case of power, we used to speak about decentralization of power. In the same way, decentralization of different work of different water funds at tributary level should be done, so that interest of stakeholders will remain same, or if it is differing, very little deviation will be there, so that different stakeholders can come together very easily. And if we go for very wider water fund in initial stage, then bringing together stakeholders of different interest, it takes different kind of interventions that will definitely take time. So what we feel and what we keep to discuss is, as a pilot, water fund should be implemented on smaller tributaries, so that making it successful and using that as a showcase will be very useful to promote the work of water fund throughout the India. And so that this movement can be strengthened. That is what we are very strongly feel about this.
And how does the water fund, the slide I had you take out, Girija, was how India's work rolls up to the 2030 goals. And it was actually quite phenomenal how much we probably should be investing more in India. How does this connect to biodiversity? Why TNC? The tool is interesting, but what are we trying to change in the ecosystem and climate adaptation system?
Right. So as I mentioned, the upstream area falls under the Western Ghats area, which is the biodiversity rich area. So one of the biodiversity hotspots globally known. So whatever work we do there, it will definitely help to protect the biodiversity, both floral, faunal, and also, so that's why we decided to focus on the upstream area, because it falls in this ecologically fragile and sensitive area. So that's why, and so we think that we will be able to contribute by protecting that part, and which will add to our 2030 goals.
Excellent.
And also we are work on the
we can share
wetlands.
the connection to the 2030 goals with the team here and send it out to the participants.
Thank you.
One more question, Tamara, tell me if I'm right when I say this. So I guess it's my statement and then you can. What has been, I'm thinking about how Sitaram was so candid about the challenges. One of the from my understanding, one of the challenges we had initially with Sebago Clean Water is we started with the approach that you talked about, talking to industry, and then trying to motivate them for their sake in some ways, because that's really what we've done in other parts of the world. Why do you think that didn't work as well, and why we've kind of shifted how we approach it? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the leading question, I'll answer myself.
It actually didn't work so well because the cost of water here in Maine is so low. So the return on investment, the business case was just not there for businesses because it didn't make economic sense because the water is just so cheap.
What's been very interesting that we have seen, and Tamara referenced this, where we've seen them, I mean, this is a partnership with Portland Water District, and their environmental team has really worked with their board, which is a quasi-public organization, to say, the business case was there, that if we invest in forest conservation, it will be less expensive. It's so easy to price out what a huge concrete system costs, and it's a lot. And so that's why they've been able to really ramp up their investment. On the case of like the breweries, Allagash has in particular been very involved. There's been more of a focus on the kind of education of our greater community about why clean water matters. Maine is unusual in many ways. This holds true, is that we haven't done as much damage as other places in the world. And so we're used to reacting when you see the harm. And so what we're trying to do in the Maine situation is prevent long-term harm. And it seems like in the Ghod River, we're dealing with the reality of a water crisis, management of water, and it is right in front of everyone's daily life, that water scarcity, what it takes for a woman to collect water, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to point out the difference between most water funds are dealing with the stress of an already very impacted system. And as Tamara said, the US, for better or worse, at least here in the Northeast, water doesn't have the same scarcity, and so it also doesn't have the same price. Not that I'm publicly advocating for raising water prices for people, but it's seen as a different type of resource. And what you were talking about, Girija, is very similar to out in the southwest of the US, how water is managed and who owns what rights. So there's a lot of similarities to our work out on the Colorado River in that case. So I think just check on Russell, any other questions on this? So I am going to thank the Camden Conference for inviting the Nature Conservancy to participate in kicking off the new year. And I want to give a warm thank you to Sitaram and Girija for participating in the evening right after the holidays. And I hope we can return the favor in some way. And the last thing, this is not a fundraising pitch, but since it was asked, one of the other big differences between our work outside of the US and here in the US is that we in the US here in Maine have been around since 1956. We have a great wealth of supporters and public funding, et cetera, long-term relationships. And our colleagues outside of the US really depends on US donors, foundations, as you've heard, but also the European Union, for example, is a significant supporter of our work in Africa. I don't know specifically about India, but I would say it's a much harder uphill task for us at the Nature Conservancy to understand that we need to get resources to places that are well outside of the US, and that we are so incredibly lucky here in the US for our ability to hopefully be good partners and support programs like the India team getting off the ground. So we're honored to be your partner. Thank you to the Camden Conference for letting us be a partner with you. And thank you all on Zoom land. And thank you, Tamara, for joining as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen, from the Sebago Clean Waters.
Right.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
joining.
much.
Camden Conference is thrilled that you were here. Thank you so, so much. You've done a wonderful job at educating us really on the kinds of problems and the solutions that you're working towards. So thank you very, very much from everybody. India,
Thank
to you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
And thanks for all those excellent questions, because they will help us also to get some clarity and also like take it forward. So thanks so much for that.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Girija and Sitaram. Have a
you.
fabulous
Thanks.
evening.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Oops. Right. Thank you.
Hey,
Right.
hello.
Okay,
So do I
right.
leave? Okay.
Right. Is it? Thank you so much, Kate, Julia, and everyone. Really.
So much, guys. That was great.